Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Trinity Continuum panel here on OnyxPathCon. I'm Ian A. Watson. I'm the content lead for the Trinity Continuum as a whole. And with me here is Danielle.
Hi, I'm Danielle Lauzon. I am the story path, really Trinity Continuum mechanical lead, but I also developed the Trinity Continuum core and Trinity Continuum adventure. But I've had a hand in the systems for all of the Trinity Continuum games. And we also have Chris.
Yes, hello, I am Chris. I am the line dev for Aberrant, and I've also had the privilege to write on quite a lot of the Eon books, the books in the Eon line as well, the core and most of the supplements. And we have John, whichever direction from my panel he is.
Kitty quarter up there. Yes. Hello, I am John Snead, and I am the developer for Trinity Continuum and have also written for the core book and just starting work on my first project for Chris for Aberrant.
Yes.
Cool. We just released Aberrant. Aeon and the core rulebook have been out for what, like a year and a half now?
A year, a little, yeah.
It came out at the beginning of
Time
December.
is weird.
Yeah, it came out at the beginning of December 2019.
Yes.
So that would be a year and a half.
They just came out in my world.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a bunch of supplements that have come out, and we've got we just recently finished up the Kickstarter for Adventure, and we've got Assassins and Anima, and in about half an hour the Anima game starts on another channel. And we just announced the next game in the Trinity Continuum, Aether. So that's all exciting. So let's get started. John, why don't you tell us a little bit about Aeon and some of the supplements that are coming up?
Okay, well, we've got a bunch of good things already out and then more coming. The two that are coming out, there's mission statements. That's the first one that Laith Shields has developed. That's more about various metacorporations and the Aeon Trinity. And then there's the Aliens book, Under Alien Skies, which I'm really excited about. I've been wanting to do that for a very long, very long time. We already got rules for the playing the Chin. This will introduce stuff for playing the Coalition, Chromatics, and the newest species to be introduced, the Listeners. So you can play a clairsentient giant starfish if you wish. And then the last one is Prometheus Unbound, which is all 8 Psi orders. More on each one.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to all those because I've contributed to all of them, but they've got some fantastic stuff in them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of creativity going to those books.
Absolutely. There's a lot of fantastic new stuff, obviously, like the various races and a lot of the corporations that we go into. And we see a lot of return to some first edition concepts, although we sort of see them in a new light. There's one corporation I'm thinking of in particular that people are going to get jazzed about, I think. But we won't get into that quite yet. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about Aberrant, or at least the stuff that's been announced?
Well, obviously Aberrant has finally just gone into the wild in general release. So it's been out with backers for a while, but it's finally hit public release, which is great. Really good to see that come out. So we've got a few things in the lineup for that. Obviously, there's stuff coming through from the Kickstarter support. So there's some products relating to Nova. There's the Proteus companion and Nova's Worldwide. There's this one because obviously I haven't been involved in this one. It's the wrestling one. I can't remember what it's called. NWE.
Yeah, it's the International Wrestling Entertainment.
The crazy, which I think is absurd, but therefore great. I absolutely love it. One of the things I like about Aberrant is obviously the fact that it's, it's supers, but with the idea of grounded nature of how they change the world around them. So it's not just our world and nothing else changes, and stuff like that with the whole Wrestling Federation. It's just a fantastic example. It's a quite specific one, but delving into that's really nice. We've got the Aberrant novellas that are coming through, and we've got the first post Kickstarter supplement that we announced, which is With Great Power, which I guess I don't know if we're planning to sort of chop this up to talk some of this stuff about some of the stuff in more depth. But With Great Power is about super teams in Aberrant. It's not just about, it's about Project Utopia. It's about Team Tomorrow, Team Tonight, and it's about the wider organizations of those novas who are basically trying to have decided, well, we're going to try and change the world in a good way in groups, grouping up and banding together in different forms around the world. So it's a book about supporting that style of play and that style of campaign. So that's everything I think we've announced for Aberrant so far. There are more ideas in the pipeline, but obviously they haven't been nailed down enough yet for announcements yet.
Thank you. And Danielle, why don't you tell us a little bit about Adventure?
All right. So Adventure just finished Kickstarter like a month or so ago. And we hit a lot of good stretch goals for it. So Adventure itself, if you're not familiar, is a pulp action game set in the 1930s. So all of the like Indiana Jones, the Rocketeer, even like the Shadow, any 1930, like any pulp serial that you can think of, you could probably run a game rooted in that kind of setting using Adventure. The main characters of Adventure are not they're not any more powerful than talents from the core. In fact, you can play talents in the core. They're called daredevils, but you also have two new character types, mesmerists and stalwarts. Mesmerists are the kind of like psychic characters. They're not scions. They're like mini versions of scions. They can kind of do similar stuff, but not nearly as powerful or as effective. And then stalwarts are kind of like mini novas. They're your strong men. They're your, they can do some kind of superhero stuff, but not necessarily nearly as well or as effectively as a nova could. And they also, they tap into scale just a little bit, but not the way that novas do. If a nova could just flick a stalwart. But so you have these three character types, and they all share the same basic inspiration pool that talents do. So if you're familiar with talents, if you run core a bit, Adventure utilizes that same system. They just have different gift sets. And so we unlocked several adventure modules. We did I think Rich suggested that we do it, and then it kind of turned into this cool thing that Eddie wrote, which is we did a little audio adventure, like an audio drama as a lead up to the Kickstarter. And we have unlocked stretch goals to essentially make that into an adventure that you could play through with your group. We've also unlocked a companion that has a bunch of cool new things that we're going to put into it. And I have some other things that I personally would like to do with Adventure as far as supplements down the line. But of course, we need to get through all of our Kickstarter stuff first. So I can't talk about those things because they're not approved.
Okay, our first question here was, do you have a release order for Anima, Assassins, and Aether? We don't really do release dates. Every Monday on our blog, on the Monday meeting notes, you can see a list of all the projects we're currently working on and the status of every project. So that's pretty much your best bet at looking to see when something is going to come out, just sort of tracking how far along it is in progression. Assassins and Anima were both started about the same time, so they're progressing at about the same pace. But we only just started with Aether, so that's not going to come out for a while yet. Assassins and Anima, like, they're being demoed here at the convention, so that's about how far along they are. but Aether doesn't even have first drafts done yet, so that's going to be a while.
Yeah, if I had to guess, like I couldn't even try to guess which of Anima or Assassins would come out first, honestly, because they're both in a very similar production cycle. So it's really a coin flip on on which of those might come out first. I don't know. I don't even know if they're considering Kickstarter for Assassins.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I mean, while we have a general idea of what sort of products we want to kickstart, we don't really plan specifically, except for maybe one or two ahead of time. So right now we know Squeaks in the Deep is next after Essence is finished, but after that it's up in the air. A lot of that depends on whether or not we have like a complete draft for something ready to preview, or like obviously we want to show some art during the Kickstarter too, so we need some of that in. But what sort of projects get kickstarted? I'm pretty sure Anima is on the list to be kickstarted, but I'm not sure about Assassins. So
Yeah, I don't know.
So whether or not, like if something goes to Kickstarter, it might take longer to come out just because of the Kickstart process. So a lot of it is up in the air. That's why I say just check the Monday meeting notes every week. And if you've backed one of the Trinity Continuum Kickstarters before, usually there's an update at the end of every single month about related projects. So if you've backed Aberrant, it'll have a list of all the stuff in the Aberrant pipeline. But yeah, we can't give any solid dates out because we don't have them. Sorry. What happened to Max Mercer after the Nova era? Unless I missed it, the Setting Secrets chapter in Anne doesn't mention him, unlike how it touches super briefly on Divismal and much more on Dr. Verona. We don't know. That's it. That's entirely up to you. We know Max Mercer has time travel capabilities, but by the time of Aeon, he's over 200 years old. So is he still alive? Is he time hopping? We don't know. That's up to you. Sorry, that's not a very satisfying answer, but
Yep.
that's where we are. What is Aether's elevator pitch? Aether is, we mentioned it a little bit. I don't want to get into too much detail because I don't want to go much far beyond what Matthew said, but it's set in the late Victorian, and it keys into things like War of the Worlds. There is an invasion of Martians. Sherlock Holmes, if you're a fan of things like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, you'll see a lot of that sort of influence going on there. There are the powered people, like they're not sort of inherently powered as far as anyone can tell, like say a Talent or a Nova or whatever, but they're explorers and scientists who have discovered ways of sort of spinning up alternate realities or alternate versions of reality, and and the dangers that naturally comes with that. That may be why the Martians are invading.
Right. I do know that one of the things Matthew did say, so if you're interested in this kind of thing, is that the powered people are not internally powered, as Ian mentioned. They actually have learned ways to harness technology to their benefit, and so a lot of the things that a talent could do innately, your characters in Aether will do because they have some weird device or some gadget or widget or something that they've either invented or found or has pulled from some alternate dimension or something like that. So it is definitely kind of a more steampunk level of kind of science and technology and just feel in general.
All right, Chris, I'm going to throw this one at you. Can we expect more on Divismal's partners and or arms?
Well, I mean, who can say the state of his arms? Partners, again, this stuff is further out down the line of things we'd like to address in Aberrant. But certainly in terms of what we've sketched out going forward, what we'd like to look at, Divismal and the Terrigen, and a lot of the stuff going on there is something that is, loosely, that we have a plan for tackling in the future. Obviously, I can't say too much since such a book has not even been outlined yet, let alone written. But from my point of view, for example, looking at things in Aberrant that you want to get in supplements, you want to tackle early on. Certainly the Terrigen, Divismal, and a bunch of the high-level figures there are quite high up the ladder of things that we will hopefully prioritize getting more information on.
All right, I think we've run out of the questions that were posted. John, you haven't said much lately. Do you have anything else that you'd want to throw out there?
Oh, let's see. Well, I'm very excited about when people start seeing stuff with Prometheus Unbound, because I think that we did a lot of nifty stuff with just sort of centering the Psi orders as, I mean, one of my thoughts of what I wanted with this game is, yeah, sure, the Aeon Trinity is really cool, and you can play someone for that, but also just a single Psi order campaign, which wasn't really something that was as big a deal in the first edition, but here it's like, you can play like all soldiers in the legions, or, rescue people from the Asclepian Order on Earth or in space or whatever. And I think, with that book out, there'll be plenty of support for doing that, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, from the writing point of view, I had a lot of fun with my section in Prometheus Unbound, which was the Ministry. But generally, I think the book's got a lot to offer for both campaigns focused on the individual ministries, as John says, because obviously you go right in depth, big chunky chapters on each organization. But also, I think it does help even with the multi-order or the outside order campaigns, because it just gives a lot more information about how each order connects in with the rest of the world. Sometimes who their rivals and their allies were and such like that. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk much about my bit of Prometheus Unbound or not, if I'm allowed to reveal anything from the contents. Do I have clearance, John, to say anything?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
not too much, but
No.
We could take the Neil Price approach, which it's a convention, spoil away.
Well,
Words he said earlier today.
the sort of the broad level thing. Well, one of the things with the Ministry for me was interesting is obviously that they're a bit of a bogeyman in some ways, because they are the order of telepaths. Now, obviously, that is no longer, in the new edition, every order has various aptitudes, but nonetheless, that's their place on the world stage. They're the guys who can read your mind. They're the big, scary intelligence ministry. But one of the things, obviously, looking at for Prometheus Unbound was, I guess, reminding everybody that the ministry are a Psi order, and they are one of these 8 heroic siders, bringing them, sort of centering them a bit more within the themes of the game, making sure they aren't, while they have that reputation and they do have that power, that's not just, the ministry aren't just, jackbooted government thugs for the Chinese government. They are a Psi order with a lot of heroic individuals in there. And the fact they have such predominant telepathy massively shapes their internal culture. So what I tried to do there was avoid a situation where it's just, it's a government ministry, they'll follow that guideline, whatever. I tried to make it an organization of primarily telepaths first that has then been molded to fit the role it's had to fit in the Chinese government for its own survival. And yeah, so there's a lot of new stuff in there. I think fans of some of the older material see there's a few references to some first ed stuff in there as well. But across the board, of the other chapters I've read, I'm really excited about what the other writers have done for their orders as well. I'm really keen to see that book hit fans' hands, because I think it'll add a lot to Trinity games, to Eon games across the board.
Cool, thanks. All right, if you could stat yourself out in any Trinity subsystem, which one would you pick, and what would your spots be? I don't think I could pick. I am spoiled by choice. I wouldn't have this job if I didn't love everything we did, and I love everything that we're doing. So I don't think I could narrow it down sufficiently to pick a single archetype. There's just too much that I love. Someone
Pick
else?
be a talent.
Good choice.
I'm not super powered. I just make a talent.
Oof. Well, if I could, Scion, I think. Ideally a teleporter for the ability to go wherever the hell. That'd probably be, yeah.
Never mind. I changed my answer. I wish to teleport.
Yeah, no, that would be pretty cool. It's like I think quantum kinetics are awesome, though. I mean, so just shape matter to your will. That'd probably be where I'd go, though. It would be hard to pick between that and some kind of aberrant. So yeah.
Oh, quantum kinesis, you have all the advantages of being a low-level Nova without the disadvantages, right?
True, you do.
Will the great trio of the main Trinity show up in either like Max Mercer, etc.? Michael Donegal is not even born yet. Max Mercer is about 6 years old. And
can he go backwards in time as well as forwards in time, though?
Theoretically, but I don't think we're going to be doing that. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I spoil who will be in Aether a little bit as an important character?
Tying it into what's in the setting secrets section of Adventure, yes.
Okay. I did put some stuff in the setting secrets, but I don't remember how much I put in there. So, so the main the main people that we're going to see is actually Max Mercer's parents. They belong to a proto-Aeon Society that actually where Max Mercer takes the name for the Aeon Society from. So we'll be seeing exploits of his parents and maybe why he is the way he is.
Yeah. His parents told him stories about the organization they belonged to. And that's why when he founded the Aeon Society, he picked that name. Yep. So the two organizations technically aren't like the Aeon Society from Adventure through to Aeon. It's the same organization. Excuse me. So that's the same organization. But this organization, although it does carry the Aeon name, it's technically a separate thing. The way I conceive of the Trinity Continuum is outside of the Mercer organization. Every era is going to have its own version of Aeon, even though it may not technically be part of that same organization. How will Anima connect to the rest of the settings? Well, it's post-Aberrant War, so it's sort of the world is rebuilding from the devastation of the Aberrant War, which was pretty devastating. It's not quite at the point where it is in Aeon yet, where although there is still rebuilding going on, society has basically recovered by that point. And so places like the FSA are still pretty new. They're like 10, 15 years old. And there's still a lot of people trying to figure out what to do now that, aberrants are gone. The world is destroyed. How are we going to rebuild this new world? And some of their decisions aren't great. And that's why 2 years after this setting, you see the Shanghai Accords, which outlaws artificial intelligence and hard tech neural implants and things like that. Like this is why that happens. So you see the connections going forward and back, although it is a standalone game. You don't need any of the other Trinity Continuum games in order to play this one, except for the core rulebook. But yeah, if you are a fan of the overall setting, you'll see a lot of connections happening. Will we get the Aegis setting like Assassin's Creed Odyssey? That is something that I would love to do, but there is no outline for it. It has not been approved by Rich. It's just sort of on the note board of my wish list of stuff that I'd like to cover. Some of that stuff I might never do. Rich once had originally proposed, just sort of off the cuff in an interview, Trinity Continuum Atomic, where we do like 1950s, like the giant ant invasion. And then Matthew proposed They Came From Beneath the Sea, which is basically covering that 1950s horror movie territory. So, I mean, maybe we can tackle that at some point in the future, but for now, it's too, like, we're not going to do two games that are basically the same thing using the story path system. So we'll see. I would love to do it, but there's no guarantee it's ever going to happen. Will Assassins join with other more SF settings on the line? Assassins is, by default, it sort of takes place in the modern period. So, Hitman, John Wick, that sort of thing. But you could combine it with any of the other era books and do like an Assassin's Creed sort of thing if you wanted. I mean, I don't think anything's stopping you, but that's not the default assumption. So if you wanted to do like some sort of ninja assassin in Aeon using the Assassin's rules, I'm sure that would be fine. Aeon Ministry. I'm not sure. Like,
I think that's retconned.
Retconned with modern China. So secret world domination by Cold War with USA of the era.
I don't know what that question is.
I'm not sure what that question is.
I mean, I can kind of. I think I get a vague picture. One thing to note.
Reconnected? Is that what that is?
I mean, one thing to note is that the China of Eon is quite different to modern China today. There's a good, we've got more than a century in between. The Ministry in Prometheus Unbound is perhaps a different perspective on the Ministry than has sometimes been taken in the past. But so the modern China isn't so massively relevant because of all the stuff China goes through between the modern day and the future. Now, the other thing is, of course, realistically, when we write games that deal with matter that has, with areas that have modern relevance, there are humanitarian concerns today about China, and I know people had said concerns about how China is depicted in things. That's not something; some of those issues are not something that we shy away from addressing in the Ministry write-up in Prometheus Unbound. It is something we touch on. And I guess all I'll say is, how well do you think it goes if you try and stick a bunch of telepaths in close proximity with humanitarian issues? And I'll leave it at that for now.
Good place. Jack says, question, there's a lot of Planescape nerds on this panel. I just wanted to point that out for reasons. You're correct. Question, how would you connect all of the era books into a single chronicle? Anima is a great way to do that. You can, using the glass implant and VR, there are historical reenactment servers. So if you wanted to take another era and run through like what your ancestors might have been doing in the adventure era, you can do that. And of course, you can tie that in with Assassins to just literally do an Assassin's Creed Chronicle if you wanted to. So yeah, that's probably the easiest way to do it. And we don't really have concrete time travel rules yet, of course, but I mean, it's the sort of thing we'd probably tackle sooner or later. But I mean, for the moment, you can just hand wave it and say, okay, you're in a different time period. So, I mean, the sky's the limit.
There's quite a few little odd things that popped up in the various books that you could use as the stepping stones and the MacGuffins, the justifications for that kind of time wonkery if you wanted to, certainly.
Absolutely. Yeah. Will characters in Anima's real world be expected to be talents, or will they usually be normals with a focus on brain implant features? By default, just because it's running from the core rulebook, we're assuming your talents, and everyone has a glass implant. You can optionally get, some various cyberware enhancements if you want to do extra stuff on top of that. But we're just assuming everyone's going to be a talent. Question. Will Assassin's characters be any different from standard talents, or will they have any unusual features? Danielle, you have a big grin on your face.
Well, I mean, I wrote some of their powers, so assassins will be talents, but they are talent adjacent. So instead of using normal talent gifts, they have their own gift set, and their gift set is a little more intentionally reality breaking than a normal talent is, so that we can model some of the wild things that you do see in movies like Wanted or John Wick, where people just do bullet magic, essentially like wizards with guns kind of thing in some of those movies. And so we wanted to be able to emulate some of that. So they function the way talents do, but they have their own gift sets.
It's the sort of thing where their capabilities are a bit more narrow, but more powerful within that narrow context.
Yes.
I think, like, why not? It's a convention. Let's spoil things.
Things.
The specific kinds of gifts that assassins get are called masteries. So we'll just leave that there.
I will say that there is a bullet bending power.
Yeah. So if you want to do the curve the bullet thing, you can do that. How does assassins fit in? I mean, it's the Trinity Continuum is an action adventure world. It's all of your favorite action adventure movies and TV series, and that includes stuff like John Wick. So while the Trinity Continuum in general is sort of that lighter, like hopeful trajectory, there sort of is that shadow world that's running right under most people's perceptions. The hotel in John Wick, for example, it's almost beyond the perception of most normal people, and like John and one of his enemies had like a literal gunfight in a crowded place, and no one paid them any attention. So we're sort of going into almost like the hidden forest of kung fu movies, where if you're a kung fu master, there's this whole hidden world that no one else knows about. And in some respects, Neverwhere almost taps into it. There is like almost this hidden world that is beyond people's perception. It's not just, people can't are ignoring it, but they can't even perceive it sometimes. Is Assassins a standalone thing? Yes, it'll. I mean, aside from using the core rulebook, Assassins is a standalone thing. But like I said, if you want to use that in any of the other eras, I'm not the boss of you.
I mean,
I'm the boss of you. Yeah. Could Syads be an anima? Sure. I don't think there's going to be support for that in the rulebook, but up to you. They exist in the universe. They do, there's no reason they can't be there during the time period, because they are during the aberrant era. So yeah, if you want to throw some Syads into the mix, by all means. What changes did you make to the setting that were needed against first edition? So, I mean, that can go for any of you.
Oh, well, I mean, there were a couple that I knew right off the bat. I mean, two of the big ones were, first edition, it started off, really good, all across the world, and, 4 women and 4 men as proxies, and lots of people of color, and then like two of the proxies, one is dead and one is vanished, with Lottie Atuan. I presume that's how you say her name. I don't know, but so I wanted them to be in the core book, and then just tweaking various of the psi orders. It's like the Asclepian Order were basically just the clerics, and I mean that's cool and necessary and stuff, but I wanted to push up the human amplification, and more importantly than that, their first responders. It's not just doctors. It's like people. I mean, part of it was sort of like just thinking about my great uncle, who was a firefighter and a fire chief, and just talk about it much because firefighters don't. But that's a real hero, and I wanted to put that in there, and making the legions not mercenaries, because what I said before, when I think of mercenaries, I think of Blackwater, whatever they're called now, and it's like,
right.
That's not heroic. That's just evil.
And doing stuff like adding in the first responder aspect, it also provides a lot more opportunities for non-Vita kinetics within the Psi Order.
Oh yeah.
And I love the artwork in the core book of the Vita kinetic first responders. Say just hoiking off
Lifting
a
up a
massive
car.
chunk of debris to save someone. I think that's one of those fantastic images that really nails what you're saying and really shows it in the new edition.
Yeah,
visually.
No, I love
Brilliantly done.
That was one of the first pieces of artwork of the game I saw. And I was like, yes, that right there. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think would be a fabulous campaign that I, have discussed some places is, either on Earth or in space or whatever, a first responders campaign. You've got like, a teleporter in a ship, and you hear from somebody that, this spaceship is in decaying orbit over a planet in trouble, and you got to go get them, or, a plane crash someplace. It's like, no fighting, but a lot of high action and important stakes. Yeah, I think it's an awesome idea.
Absolutely. Danielle, I know the big change we did for Adventure was moving it up 10 years.
Yes. So that was actually your suggestion, which I think was extremely intelligent, which
Thank you.
is that we moved it from 1924 to 1934 for many reasons. It is both, it is a second edition, but we kind of take the setting from first edition and we say, yes, all that happened mostly, except for some small changes that we made. Otherwise, here it is now 10 years later. And it was good to be able to do that because we could revisit some of the things that happened in 1924, such as like the name of the Anne Society, the name of which organizations are good, which organizations are bad, et cetera, without completely retconning what's going on in the setting. And also because Anne mentioned some stuff about the Anne Society, Aberrant mentioned some stuff about the Anne Society, Trinity Core mentioned stuff about Anne Society, and I didn't want to contradict any of that information. And so making that stuff kind of giving us a 10-year window of, oh yeah, it was the Anne Society for Gentlemen when the Anne Society was first founded, but we don't call it that anymore. It's 10 years later. Instead of, because I don't want to call it that in our game. I don't want, people to feel like it's only for men when it isn't. And so it allowed us to kind of make some changes without retconning the entirety of the setting. It also allows us to write in Nazis as bad guys, of which you can freely punch at will whenever you feel like it.
That was a big plus.
That's one of the important reasons.
Yeah. So, we have all this, it allows us to give a lot more setting depth and, what have these organizations been up to for the past 10, kind of 10 years, but also, more like 14, 13 years since the Hammersmith incident. It's also because the whole adventure didn't ever have any supplements. So we have just the core book. And if we want to dig into that setting more, we had to come up with stuff on our own. And since we did want to dig into that setting more, we were like, okay, well, let's give us 10 years of stuff we can make up without changing anything from first edition and without retconning anything that we've said in later parts of the timeline, but earlier books. So that's kind of the biggest change from first to second edition that we made for adventure, is that kind of pushing things up by 10 years.
Since you've introduced the idea of Martian invasion in Aether, are alien visitations or invasions possible in other Trinity Continuum games? I've always assumed we didn't meet any aliens until the Aeon era.
They're there in adventure. That's the whole reason that adventure is adventure instead of like Novas and Scions. It's, stalwarts and mesmerists because of the Doyen.
Yeah.
So
after the Hammersmith explosion, I mean, we're getting into setting secrets territory here, so plug your ears if you haven't read that section. The Doyen, who are sort of alien snotballs in the Aeon setting, they detected the Hammersmith explosion in 1922 and sort of put a psi bubble around Earth to sort of prevent any future Hammersmith-style explosions from happening. Just sort of like, let's just put that aside for now until we figure out what to do with these humans. And that only lasts for about 100 years before Divis Mal finally goes, no, I'm tired of this. And the Doyen finally figure out what it is they're going to do by the Aeon period. They're long thinkers. They don't react very quickly to things. But yeah, the potential for alien visitation is definitely there, especially if you're talking about visitation from alternate dimensions. There's a doctor in the Trinity Continuum core rule book, a perfectly normal human doctor named Francis Smith, who Dr. Francis Smith is from an adjacent universe, and he's trying to get back home.
Just a normal, everyday human doctor trying to get home.
Yep. And if you've read the adventure manuscript, then you know that there's also another Dr. Smith in that one, who may or may not be from the same dimension.
Or may not be Francis's mother.
Yeah.
Every perfectly normal human being has to have a mother, after all.
Of course.
Yes, absolutely. And
so
8 legs.
So in Aether, will the Aeon Society for Gentlemen as in 18... No, the Aeon Society for Gentlemen is founded by Max Mercer in 1923. The version of the organization in the 1890s is a separate organization, and it's called Aeon, like it has that in its name, but it's not the same organization. Yes, Ardric mentions the Esoteric Order of the Aeons, which is the name from the Setting Secrets chapter of Adventure.
That's it.
Yep, that looks like I'm up to date on all of the questions so far. We've got about 15 minutes left on the clock. If there are any more questions, or if any of you want to say anything cool about stuff you're looking forward to.
Well, since it's a day for revealing things, I have a question. I have a question for John. John, what do you think is the coolest thing in Under Alien Suns? What's the coolest bit in the book you're looking forward to?
Oh boy, well, I mean, there's sort of several ways to answer that. I mean, I utterly love the idea of playable coalition phyla. I've wanted that for a long time. I mean, among other things, it's also, it's not, they're not, scions or syads or nova power. They're alien talents. That's cool. And like each of them has their own, unique physicality and stuff. And so I really, really like that. But also I think it's really nifty that this is a game that finally dives into, a number of, I think people will be very interested in sort of, here's the doyen, actually a lot about them, their history and things like that. And I think that will be sort of eye-opening and useful and pretty nifty. And I mean, beyond that, there's just a hell of a lot of awesome stuff. I mean, being done mainly as an example on how to create alien stuff. Your stuff with the gardeners was like marvelous.
Thank you. I'll take that compliment.
I did notice a question that somebody asked, I think that you missed in that I can probably answer,
Sure.
which is a question about anima. It's essentially, are the mechanics that cover Terra Surge and anima similar enough to the ones that cover the real world that I could bring about a situation where Terra Surge effects powers manifest in the real world? And the answer is the mechanics are using story path mechanics, but they are different enough to where they're really for the characters in Terra Surge. And also the fiction of what's going on in Terra Surge and what's going on in the real world and how Terra Surge works. You can't really manifest powers from Terra Surge in the real world. There will be some things that happen in Terra Surge that clearly impact characters in the real world. But you're not going to be able to, lightning bolt somebody or throw, your fantasy magic at them and have it actually affect them. Now, could you say like maybe hack their glass and make them believe that they're feeling things that they would be feeling in character? Maybe that's a storyline that you could go with, but that's not the intent.
Thank you.
Oh man.
Will Assassins and Anima be the same sizes as other Trinity core books? Pretty much. I mean, maybe a little larger, maybe a little smaller, but roughly the same size.
Yeah.
What are the next 5 books coming for the Trinity Continuum? You'll have to look at the Monday meeting notes.
Yeah.
Like I said, we don't do release dates. The best you can do is look at the list of products coming out and seeing where they are on the production schedule. And then you can look at the 5 that look like they're likely to be released soon. Not a question per se, but I would love a new technical manual for Aeon specifically. A lot of that is in the Aeon expansion.
Yeah.
We don't have like a full technical manual, but the what you need to make tech is mostly in there.
Most of the young books, I think, John, you've had sections in there which have some gear or some tech in each book. So there's something relevant for each theme, I think, in the given supplements. Isn't there?
And that continues. It's like Under Alien Skies is a bunch of here's some tech that the aliens use, and Prometheus Unbound is like some weird biotech and other things that are order specific, and so there's I think probably even though the original Trinity line went on for a while, I think there's a good bit more tech out for this game than for that one.
I think the chromatic translator device that was in the Darkness Revealed series to begin with, was it Darkness Revealed or was that Alien Encounter? I think it was Alien Encounter. I think we've got that in Under Alien Skies, don't we?
Yes.
Okay. So if you'd like to communicate with chromatics, that little photokinetic translator dealy should be in there. came in late, so hopefully this wasn't answered, but is there anything from first edition Aberrant that any of you would love to explore?
That's an interesting question. Obviously, from my point of view, I'll leave it open to others first because I've got some thoughts. But if any others have anything to say, I'd be intrigued to hear.
It's all yours.
Yeah.
Awkward silence. So it's a bit tricky because a lot of stuff has changed since first ed. A lot of things have been. We talked about earlier about things that have changed since first editions and second editions. John talked a lot about somehow the side orders were working, and in Aberrant, obviously, a lot of stuff has changed, which was originally pretty grim. And there's a lot of stuff that was taken aside because it was perhaps a little, I'm not going to say too dark, but unnecessarily dark for the Aberrant setting. There's some stuff that was taken aside, and that's it means that. Going back to first ed stuff all has to, if you're doing anything like that, you have to revisit it via the light of, what we're doing in the second edition is coming from a different baseline. That said, there's all sorts of fun bits and pieces back there to look at through that different lens, of what we changed. Some of which is going to be with great power, I think, with, say, looking at some of the first, looking at for inspiration at some of the first stuff about the other supergroups in the world. That are around the place, like the Japanese and the Australian teams. That's not to say we will necessarily have the same groups or the same teams in with great power, but it's certainly something to look at for sort of inspiration, and revisit some of these. And I think with what we kind of have in mind for the line of Aberrant, I think there's going to be a certain amount of revisiting with each book, going back, taking some of the best bits from first ed, looking at it through the prism of the new setting, the revised setting, and hopefully bringing out the best bits. I'm really keen for when we do, as mentioned before, get to the Terrigen, partly because, since first ed, there's been a lot of very interesting superhero media out there about superhero, posthumanism, transhumanism, some of the darker stuff, but also just some of the more, I suppose, philosophical looks at what it means to have superpowers, which would be quite cool to look at the old Terrigen stuff through that sort of modern lens as well. It's a big setting, so it's hard for me to pick out anything specific, but I think there's a lot of stuff to look at, certainly.
What are your dreams of new settings, like Aegis? I got permission from Rich to talk about Aegis, even though it's not an approved product. So I don't want to spoil any more of my potential future plans, because then it won't be a pleasant surprise. Like Aether, for example. Aether that was one of the things I had up on my planned projects board for a long time, long before the core rulebook came out. And there are some people who were guessing that the Victorian period might be one of the things I wanted to do. They were right, but it's not as fun if I give everything up front. Here's a random question.
I just, as I mentioned, I won't say the name of it, but there was a point where we were going through slightly jokingly names for new Trinity Continuum products based purely on the letter A, and I sort of jokingly came up with something at the time, and I can't talk about it. We're now looking at it in a slightly different context of maybe how to go with that idea. But so I think there's some interesting ideas coming through, but there is something was really meant to be a joke has taken on a bit of a life of its own. We'll see what comes of that.
Now I want to know what it is.
I'll
I'm
tell you
sure we
later.
can talk about it.
Oh, okay.
Off stream.
I get to know later. Yay.
Given how much StoryPath has influenced the development of Exalted Essence, how easy would it be to run Exalted in Anima? Exalted Essence, although it is a simpler version of Exalted 3rd Edition, it's still quite a mechanically complex game. And Anima is a much simpler version, or rather the MMO portion of it is a much simpler version of the StoryPath system. So I mean, I'm sure you could do it, but I wouldn't know where to begin.
I mean, my only suggestion would be you could literally use Anima to play any other game, but you wouldn't be playing story
Yeah.
path anymore. You'd just be like, oh, we're in the anima world and now we're using this rule book. Like
Yeah.
that's how you could do that, but it wouldn't port like at all.
Yeah, as you say, there's influence perhaps on development of XS. Maybe I'm not involved in it, but influence doesn't mean mechanical compatibility per se.
No, not at all.
Like, for example, I think the Exalted Essence crew is taking a cue from how StoryPath does NPC write-ups, but that doesn't mean that, you know, Exalted Essence is suddenly using the StoryPath system for NPCs.
Yeah.
Will we be seeing more detailed coverage of space exploration tech in upcoming books like Under Alien Skies, or more detail on Vargs and battling aberrants in space?
There's alien space exploration tech to some degree in Under Alien Skies, and a little bit. And there is some more space exploration tech in Prometheus Unbound too.
Yeah, from an aberrant point of view, you know, space exploration in that era is something we have on the list of things to look at at some point in future. Again, no promises because we're not even at the outline stage for those things, but it's on the list.
It's something themed for I can't even remember their names now.
The Daedalus League.
Yes, thank you. I knew it started with a D,
There we
but
go,
all I was
yeah.
thinking was the directive, and that's the wrong group.
Certainly, if you wanted to think about what kind of product might cover things like space exploration for aberrant, you might think about also the Daedalus League being in there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Would StoryPath ever cover fantasy? That's basically what we're doing with Anima. Because the MMO is a fantasy MMO. It's not using the full StoryPath system, but it is using sort of that cut down version of it. But if you wanted to run a fantasy game using StoryPath, you could use a combination of the MMO material from Anima and something like Scion, SCION, which is itself a modern fantasy game, to probably do what you needed to do with it.
You could also, I mean, you could bodge it together from the core book. You know, use scions as different kinds of mage, for example. I think you could, with all the bits out there, I think you could build a custom setting for fantasy pretty easily.
Which modern day aberrant becomes the colony? Slider. That is my canonical answer. I'm ruining everything for everyone.
That's such a great answer.
Yeah.
Curious about avatars in the TerraSurge MMO. We only have about 2 minutes left, so this is going to have to be a quick answer. Are they set up with classes or roles or paths?
They use paths. They use mini paths that are both their society where they grew up and their class. So they get two paths, one for society, one for class, and then those determine all of their starting stats.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and I'm sorry for making all of you miss the first 30 minutes of the Anima game, which is going on another channel, and we're all going to go over and watch that right now.
Yes, we are.
So thank you all very much. Thank you, John, Danielle, and Chris for joining me, and
it was great.
Hope you enjoy the upcoming products for the Trinity Continuum.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.